Hello and welcome to episode 121 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined again by Mathias and Chris Bello of MMO. Guys, it's good to see you. I wish it was on better circumstances, but as we tape this podcast a couple hours earlier, Edwin Diaz has signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers. 3 years, $66 million. The Mets all-star closer. The trumpet man, really has turned into one of the best closers in the NL, if not all of baseball, is gone. The Mets did sign David Williams. We talked about it on the last show, but I think we all agreed that we didn't like that as a singular move. We wanted Devin Williams to be setting up Edwin Diaz, but that has not gone this way. Edwin Diaz goes to probably the one team in the whole world you don't want him going to, in the Dodgers, and it's a very stark feeling for the Mets offseason than it was a year ago, comparatively. I don't know what else to say. This is a huge blow to the Mets, huge blow to their bullpen. I don't know how they can replace that kind of productivity from Diaz. You hope that Devin Williams can find that Milwaukee form. That sub-2 ERA he had a few years ago, and you go from there. But it's a rough day in Mets land. Especially again to the team that he goes to, and over a difference, it seems like of a couple of $1 million. We'll get to that. But Mathias, I'll start with you. Just want to get your reactions about Diaz leaving here.
Yeah, so I'll say this much. I had a weird feeling last night that the chances of Diaz leaving were starting to increase when all of a sudden there's a rumor that the Mets have reached out to the Brewers about Trevor McGill. Now, here's the thing. Trevor McGill, very good pitcher. But there's probably a reason they were already doing that. You wouldn't trade for McGill or be reaching out to the Brewers about trading for McGill if you were confident you were going to bring Diaz back. It would make no sense to have McGill, Williams, and Diaz. Three different closers would not necessarily equate to success. Looking at the contract, though, it's 3 years, $69 million. So it's about $23 million a year with some deferrals that bring the AAV down. The Mets were offering 3 years, $66 million, and supposedly had wiggle room to improve the offer, but they didn't even get to respond. This kind of tells me maybe Diaz just really wanted to go to the Dodgers. And I mean, look, the Dodgers won the World Series for the second year in a row with a shaky bullpen. Both years, the bullpen was kind of their weakness. So it didn't surprise me that they were going to be a strong player for Diaz. And unfortunately, I had a feeling if he was going to leave, it was going to be to the Dodgers. I didn't expect it to happen this quickly. I didn't expect it to be on that contract. I mean, it's a record-setting deal in terms of average annual value, but it seemed like he was going to get a 5-year deal if he walked, and he ended up getting a 3-year deal. So, in 2023, when the Mets lost Diaz for the season to that injury, I was trying to say that the closer is sort of a replaceable position, but as we learned that year, Diaz was very hard to replace. And right now, the Mets have a huge hole to fill, whether it's Williams, whether it's getting another high leverage reliever to set up Williams, whether it's getting another closer to have Williams set up for. I need to know how the Mets are going to respond. I mean, can they even respond? I mean, it's a big ask, and I'm curious to see what David Stearns and Steve Cohen have in store, because this is a huge, huge blow, especially with him going to another National League competitor.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
I mean, let's call a spade, guys. This is a massive, colossal failure by David Stearns and Steve Cohen. You're the money guy. You're the owner with the most money in baseball. When you bought the team, there is no amount of money we won't spend. This is a charity case. David Stearns has joked all off season. I think that the owner has my back and I can spend as much money as I want. Well, there's your chance. And when it comes to Edwin Diaz as well, I don't really think there's another closer in the game that's even close to his tier. Sure, maybe Mason Miller, but even he had his bumps and bruises last year. It seems like Edwin Diaz has that one game a year, like whether it was last year with the Corbin Carroll or the Christopher Morel, that maybe he'll blow up. But outside of that, that guy's nails. You know that if you have a lead in the 8th inning, if you need 6 outs, 5 outs, 4 outs, or even just the 9th, he's going to come in there and it's going to be locked down. And even when he's not locked down, he'll find his way out of it. Go back to that Reds game when they were in Cincinnati and he loaded the bases and he struck out 3 guys in a row. So replacing Edwin Diaz isn't possible. And when you're the owner with the most money and you can go that extra mile and say he wants to come back, why would you even mess around with the contract? Just say, here's 4 years. Here's the same deal we have AAV-wise, or even bump it up a couple of million if that's important to him, and give it to him. Because right now, you just got rid of the Nimmo contract. You brought in Simeon. You brought in Williams on kind of a good deal where it's, shorter in 3 years. But those are all great peripheral contracts. Those are all great players if you add something big around them. But by themselves, Devin Williams as the closer, let's be honest, he didn't have a good year last year. Peripherals were great. Strikeout numbers, whiff numbers were there. But the ERA, that actual important stat at the end of the year, it was not good month to month outside of June. So when you bring somebody in like that to hope for a bounce back, we can see when it works out, like with Luis Severino. We can see when it doesn't work out with Frankie Montas. And when you're trying to win and you're on a clock, you need a player like Edwin Diaz back. No questions asked.
Yeah, I'm kind of at a loss. It's a matter of $3 million, but from what we're seeing, the Mets didn't get a chance to match final. So I don't know. We talked a little bit off camera. To me, that says a couple of things. It's either he wanted out, he wanted to go to the Dodgers, he didn't want to be here anymore, or it's one of those things where it happens where the Dodgers may have said to him, "Listen, we understand." You want to give the Mets last and final here, but if you go to another team, or especially a team like the Mets that's going to match, this deal is off the table. Whether it's that or again, you want to be here, it doesn't really matter. He's not here anymore. I hope it's not over money, because like we've talked about, when you have the richest owner in the sport and there's no salary cap, which we know is going to be a big sticking point next year. There may be lost baseball over all that. But you don't have to deal with that. And this is a win now team. It's a bullpen that needs a hell of a lot of help. Even, if they signed Diaz, if they had just Diaz and Williams, there's still things there. But this is from the looking at so far of this offseason, you have essentially traded Nimmo and Edwin Diaz for Devin Williams and Marcus Simeon. And I don't care what anybody says about numbers, upside metrics, or anything. The Mets didn't win that. The Mets did not win that with either player. They got a lesser player at each position now that they've replaced. So I don't know what they do. I don't know how you pivot here. If it's trades or whatnot, I don't know outside of other arms, high leverage back end bullpen arms. I didn't hear of much else outside of Diaz in this, free agent class. They signed Carl Edwards Jr. to a minor league deal. If I have to see Carl Edwards Jr. throw significant innings for the Mets in the bullpen, I'm not going to a lot of games. Hope was looking at that as a 40-man depth piece, but now who the heck knows? This is a huge blow. This is a franchise blow. I don't know how they pivot from here, but I'll tell you, if they look at the fan base and say that this is an issue over money, no one's going to want to hear that. And that being said, this makes re-signing Pete Alonso even more important. He can't close games, unfortunately. He can't do that. But just optics-wise, if you let another star player, and that be a homegrown player, walk out the door, there's going to be that love affair that Cohen had, that buffer. It felt like it's going to be gone. Stearns didn't really have one to begin with. It felt like Mets fans have been pretty critical of him since he got here. But this love affair is going to be gone. No one's going to care about a casino, a park, anything like that. If they start letting these stars walk out of here over money. At this point, I know that the industry's kind of talking about Alonso. It's tough. They see him getting a 5-year deal and a 4-year deal. Give him a 5-year deal. I don't care. Kyle Schwarber got 5 for $150. Do that too. I could care less. The guy's got to come back now. Whether Stearns sees him the long-term plan or not, can't lose another star. And just for me to cap this Diaz thing, what frustrates me the most, I think, is as fans, it was not all sunshine and rainbows here when Edwin Diaz first got here. You could argue that if he was halfway competent in 2019, the Mets make the playoffs and maybe make a run like the Nationals with the starting staff that they had and how prolific Alonso was his rookie year hitting the ball. Even with Mickey Callaway mixing up the lineup, I think they still could have made a run. He struggled his first really 2 years here. 19, 20 was the COVID year, but he still struggled there. 21 was better, but still, had some growing pains. And we know what happened from 2022 on. And, I feel like the fan base really stuck with him. He seemed to stick it out here and wanted to be here. So, I don't know what to think of it, but ultimately it doesn't matter. He's a Dodger now. And the best team in baseball just got a hell of a lot better, like the point you made, Mathias. They've won back-to-back World Series with bad bullpens. Their closer, Tanner Scott, wasn't even on the postseason roster last year, so or at least the World Series roster. So, he slots into the 8th inning, and now you have Diaz manning things there. This is a tough blow, man. The NL is stacked. It's stacked with young talent, and the Mets right now do not stack up. Forget the division. They just don't stack up, it feels like right now at all. With any of the big dogs in the National League. This doesn't even feel like a 70-win team right now, the way it's constructed. I know we were talking a little bit about it, but there's just so much to do now. So much that I don't even know how you accomplish it in off season.
And really, the other thing is, like, I look at the National League, and I don't know if anybody can stop. Like, there's no one in the same stratosphere as the Dodgers. That's the other thing, is that the Dodgers paid, like we were saying, their bullpen was the weakness. They paid $40 million combined to Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, and Blake Trinan. All three of them had rough years.
Yeah,
they go out and get the best closer in baseball. They've built a Death Star, really. It's insane to think about, and it felt like that was to what you said earlier. It felt like the last thing anyone around the sport wanted, was to see Diaz sign with the Dodgers. Here we are. He's going to the Dodgers. There are other relievers on the market. I mean, Robert Suarez is probably the best available free agent, led the majors in saves. Trevor McGill, I think, is better than any free agent out there. So if the Mets are able to cobble together a trade package for him, I say go get him. He's 30. Yes, he's 32, but he's controllable. He had a great season last year. He had a great season in 2024. He was an all-star. Saved 30 games. He was effective after his injury too in the postseason. Pete Fairbanks and Kenley Jansen are out there. I guess they could have Williams close, but really, like I said, this is a massive hole to fill, and it's probably not going to be just one guy you can get.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of pressure on the front office. There's a ton of pressure on Steve Cohen to do something to amend this. I'm not even saying it's necessarily entirely their fault, because like we were saying, Diaz didn't give them a chance to respond, but it's a mess. I don't know. I look at this current roster, excluding Alonso. I have a hard time thinking that they can contend with this current roster. And maybe all the losing down the stretch did play a role. I mean, SNY posted a video of the last time Edwin Diaz converted a save at Citi Field this year. I was at that game with my brother and my two young nephews. It was on August 16th. That's how poorly they played the rest of the year. They went the final 6 weeks of the year. Edwin Diaz did not get a single save at Citi Field the rest of the season. So the team played poorly, and honestly, maybe the team performance did play a factor into this.
Here's my problem with Robert Suarez. Phenomenal pitcher. I'm not saying he's not. He had a 2.97 ERA. He's probably going to get a contract in the 20 million AAV range. Edwin Diaz was a full run lower than that, more than a full run lower than that. And that just goes back to what I was saying about the tiers. And what's $3 to $4 million more to Steve Cohen? It's not that much per year. And the tier, it's not even in the same stratosphere, Robert Suarez and Edwin Diaz. And when you're trying to replace that with a Robert Suarez and a Pete Fairbanks, or like you guys mentioned, somebody else, you're going to end up paying way more to replace one guy with 2 to 3 guys. And on top of that, I know the big conversation this year was switching up the core and getting rid of guys like Nimmo and maybe Alonso and maybe Edwin Diaz. But when you look at this the most successful year this core has had, it was 2022 when there were great peripheral players around the core. When you had Mark Canha, when you had Eduardo Escobar, when you had Starling Marte, when you brought in guys later, even in 24, like Harrison Bader, you had players around them. And this year, if you go and you look at the 1 through the 4, I'm not even talking about the pitching side of this. The guys around them were, let's be frankly honest, prospects that didn't work out. Brett Beatty, a great second half. He was abysmal in the first half of the season. Mark Vientos did not play well the entire season. Starling Marte, as we were talking about earlier before the show, he's just at an age now where his game has regressed. They didn't have players around their top 4 guys. So when you move Nimmo, sure, I can subscribe to that because the foot is clearly not the same and he's aging and the contract's bad. But letting go of Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso when they both had career years and when they're both integral pieces to your roster, and then you want to charge your fans $40 for parking, and you want to be adding a casino, and you want to charge $15 to $20 for a hot dog and a beer, well, you might not be selling out crowds. And I don't necessarily have any more sympathy for a guy like David Stearns when I feel like the majority of the fan base has defended him the last 2 years. And you let your best closer, not only in the game, but probably the most surefire thing since this league has seen since Mariano Rivera in the last 3 years, just go to the best team in the entire planet. So it's just, I think everybody is so shocked and concerned because you let a guy go over $3 million, and we're all not naive. I think Mets fans know that there's no replacing Edwin Diaz.
Yeah, and also to add on real quick is that part of the reason they were so good in 2022 is also they had an elite setup man for Diaz. Is that it wasn't, there was the thing is that this year Diaz was great. It was literally just Diaz in the bullpen by the end of the year, it felt like. They had Adam Ottavino setting up Diaz in 2022, and he was excellent. The next year, Adam Ottavino was setting up David Robertson. Not saying David Robertson is bad necessarily, but there was a clear downgrade from Diaz to Robertson, and then eventually with just Ottavino closing, the team was not the same. And also in 2024, again, it was a case where Phil Maton's arm, it felt like, was hanging by a thread. It was just him setting up Diaz, who had all sorts of issues before, I'd say, July. Heck, you could push that even into August with the back-to-back games where he allowed the home run to Merrill, the grand slam to Carroll. Diaz was rough for the first half, I'd say, of 2024. He even lost his closer's role. He had a suspension. He had an IL stint. But yeah, he was a fan favorite, like Sal was saying. And to your point, Chris, yeah, I think the rope is starting to run thin from the fan base on David Stearns. I think he's a very smart baseball mind. I still want to believe that he's the right guy in charge of baseball ops for the team, but I can't blame fans for having a short rope with him now because, I mean, he's lost Diaz, he traded Nimmo, and, I mean, they might be on the verge of losing Alonso too. Who knows?
Yeah, my problem with David Stearns right now, especially, is not that I don't think he's smart. I think he's one of the greatest minds in baseball right now. His ability to build a farm system like he did in Milwaukee and like he did in Houston as an intern during their rebuild is, like, in no question, you cannot doubt it. But my major problem is this isn't Milwaukee. And when you have a guy like Edwin Diaz who wants to return, you have the richest owner in baseball who is willing to spend money, you can't dodge around, well, let's give him 3 years and he'll come back to us because, as Sal kind of alluded to, you don't know if they're going to come back. And who knows if he felt slighted by that, or who knows if the Dodgers said to him, you will not get this contract if you go and shop it around. We don't know that. But I think the major point is that you have the ability to avoid all that, kind of like Billy Epler did when he signed him to that 5-year deal before the winter meetings even started. So that's where the rope's starting to run a little thin with David Stearns, which is the Frankie Montazes and the Luis Severinos of the world are great when you surround it with the talent you're able to get because of the pocketbook you're given.
Yeah. I think you guys said it best. I mean, they just have to sign Pete Alonso. I don't know what else to say because I'm going to chalk this up to a mix of things. I'm going to think more than anything, he didn't want to come back. He wanted to go to the Dodgers. He wanted to go to a team that's the best team in the sport. There's not as much pressure. Even though they're the best team in the sport, they still play in Los Angeles. There's not as much pressure. Being in this market, I understand it's a vacuum. When you don't play well, it's magnified times 1,000. When you do play well, it's magnetized the other way, right? But if they do also let Pete Alonso walk, and I don't care who it is, because the Red Sox, anybody else, there's going to be a hard time explaining why all of a sudden now, with the team that they have, Juan Soto's not the youngest player in the world either. He's in the prime of his career. We talked off camera about that. We may have seen the best days of Lindor as a Met, behind him now. The window's here. These guys are getting paid. They're going to be here for a long time. So there is no, wait and see and maybe do a little miniature retool because you want players that you like, as far as philosophy goes. The philosophy didn't work last year. I know they addressed that by moving guys like Nimmo and obviously letting Diaz go, but there are players that can win here, guys that you have like Alonso that can win and help you win. Don't let them both walk out the door because no matter what you do, again, without Alonso and the way this team is constructed, this is a 70-win team. Put that behind it. But also, you just optics. There's no way the richest owner in the sport can let their, as it was, two of their three best players from last year walk out the door. One of them is Juan Soto that's here for 15 years. You did that already last year. Can't let both of these guys walk out of the door. That would just be really, really, really bad and make me sad. And they don't want to make me sad more, right? That would be bad. We've talked a lot about Alonso here. I mentioned Carl Edwards. Yuck. Staying on the pitching side, the Mets are, from what it seems like, talking to Michael King. That's good. The Mets need starting pitching. The Mets need everybody. Maybe they should hold a tryout at Citi Field. Steve Cohen can pay them a nice bonus because the Mets just need everyone. But listen, Michael King is someone that probably is, going to be a multi-year deal, whether it be 3 or 4 year deal, something like that. I saw something that the Mets don't want to commit long-term to starting pitching. Well, you got no choice. You got to do something. So just want to get your thoughts on Michael King, talking to them, if he's someone you think is a fit. Chris, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think any starting pitcher who can start a playoff game is a fit for this team. They have no starting pitching that is really reliable in a game one, I would say, outside of Nolan McLean. And, this kind of, I think, coincides with the Alonso talks because they want to improve their defense. And don't get me wrong, Pete Alonso's defense definitely cost them when Kodai Senga got hurt. But if you watched that team last season and you thought that defense was a top 5 reason why they lost a lot of games down the stretch, I don't think you were watching the same games that I was. It was clearly the starting pitching. Then it was the offense not cashing in their runs. And then it was what Mathias said earlier, the bullpen not being able to link its way to Edwin Diaz, mostly because they were coming in the 4th inning every other game. So I get the defense aspect of it, but like you kind of alluded to, somebody like Alonso needs to be back. But back to Michael King, yeah, Michael King would be great. Cashing in all your chips for Tarek Skubal, I think, is a must at this point from my eyes. I was really big on the Garrett Crochet train before he got moved to Boston. I thought, why would you not do that when somebody like that is available? Obviously, the Red Sox had a better package. So long story short, yeah, Michael King would be a fantastic add to this roster.
And real quick, to your point, if you go all in for Paul Skeens, no one's going to remember Edwin Diaz. I'm just saying. You go do something like that, even if it is Skubal or Skeens, but Skeens especially. If you do something like that, everyone's going to be up in arms. They're going to go, Edwin who? I never heard of him before. But Mathias, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the trade market probably presents better options, but I think Michael King has the highest ceiling of any of the free agent starters.
Sure.
You look, this is the thing is, I don't think he'll get a super long-term deal because he's coming off a year where he got injured. He missed a couple months with shoulder inflammation. He also missed a month with a knee problem. But in between that, he was very good. He was 7th in Cy Young voting in 2024. And last year, I mean, he had a 3.4 ERA, but that was in a small sample size. It's really inflated by one bad outing, which coincidentally was against the Mets. He allowed 8 earned runs and allowed 4 homers in 3 innings. That was his one bad outing all year, really. He didn't give up more than 3 runs in any other outing. And he was able to pitch in the postseason. Granted, it was only 1 appearance, but he was available. He was back and healthy. And he, like I said, he probably won't command an offer longer than, say, 4 years. And I think this is definitely a guy where he's a candidate for a deal that has an opt-out. Because he had injuries this past year, I could see him getting 3 years or 4 years with like an opt-out after year 1 or year 2. Perfectly reasonable. The Mets need someone to support Nolan McLean. It can't just be a rookie being the ace of the staff. So I'd be all in on Michael King if I were the Mets.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Michael King, again, would be a great add. And kind of like what Mathias said, I think the trade market is way better. I think that you have to walk away with one of Tarek Skubal or one of Joe Ryan if the Twins decide that they want to make the right decision and move him. And it's mostly because or Freddie Peralta from the Brewers, and mostly because that window, whether you want to admit it or not, is closing. Francisco Lindor is going to be 32 next season. Juan Soto is going to be approaching 30 and is in his prime age-wise right now. So if it's only 1 year of Tarek Skubal, but they win that year, why would you not try and do that? Just to throw it out there, I would easily package somebody like David Peterson, Brandon Sproder, Jonah Tong, and Brett Beatty, and maybe a minor league arm, and give that for Skubal. And then going back to what we alluded to, give him whatever he wants once he hits free agency, because then you have Skubal, then you have McLean, and then you even have guys like Christian Scott or one of Sproder Tong, or then a Michael King. You can get creative with it, but if they don't cash in right now, honestly, my biggest fear for this organization right now is kind of doing what the Orioles did last year, which is you have all of these guys, and you've got Kobe Mayo, and you've got Heston Kierstad, and you've got Kyle Stowers, and you don't do anything with them. And then everything kind of flatlines. And then you make a desperation move to trade Kyle Stowers, and you get like Trevor Rogers.
Right.
And it's no disrespect to Trevor Rogers. He had a great year last year. But you're in that dangerous territory now where you have Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, Ronnie Mauricio, Jet Williams, and even Mitch Voigt, who just got drafted last year, all in the infield. Let Carson Bench take the outfield. Everybody else should be available, because at the end of the day, they're all not Hall of Famers. Tarek Skubal's won 2 back-to-back Cy Youngs.
Yep.
Yeah, really. And I just thought of this also to, and this is way out there, and I don't know if I don't even think I've seen him mentioned in trade rumors, but the Astros are kind of in a weird spot right now. Maybe you look at trying to see if they're willing to offload Josh Hader's contract to help the bullpen. In addition to trying to trade for one of the arms on the starting pitchers on the market. That just like popped in my brain. There are many avenues to improve the team. The ball is in David Stearns' court because like you guys were saying, this is the opportunity. It's an aging roster. And I feel like, say, God forbid Alonso does actually walk, it's sort of admitting that the core was not good enough.
Right. But
you have to improve upon that core. And, I don't know if he's going to be on the team next year, but Jeff McNeil is going to be 34 next year. There are guys who are on the wrong side of 30 here. I mean, Marcus Semien just joined, but he's 35. So, yes, they do have young talent, but they also have aging veterans on the roster who we don't know if they're going to be the same players beyond. Heck, are they even going to be the same players next year? So, a lot of pressure on the front office, but I think there's still avenues to improve the team.
There are avenues because they are not good, so they have to improve the team. They have to take those avenues. There's no other GPS route to take, because this roster is about 70 wins if they're lucky right now. It's just insane. I mean, we could talk a little bit about, just kind of wrap it up. I know we talked a little bit about Marte, I know Soto really likes him as a mentor and kind of he felt he was a de facto captain of the team last year. Would you feel comfortable with bringing Marte back? It would obviously have to be in some sort of 4th, 5th outfield role. He's not getting significant playing time. He's the active leader in stolen bases in baseball. He had a pretty good year last year when he played, but he's an older player. I personally would rather give the chance to the youth. If you're not going to trade, the Hall for a School or someone like that, having a Jet Williams, a Bench, guys like that, opportunities to play more. But I'm curious, I guess, to see what you guys think. Chris, you can go ahead.
I think bringing back Marte would actually be a good idea. I think it'd be naive and too analytical to say that clubhouse environments and him being the leader, I put in quotes, and the mentor to that group, I think that's weighed as an important value to that team. So if it's a 1-year deal and he kind of knows the situation, maybe he's a DH against left-handers. I think he still proved he could come off the bench and get a big hit when they needed him to. I think it'd be valuable to bring back Starling Marte.
Yeah, the reality is, you can't really sign him to be an everyday player. Right. I don't think he necessarily hits enough to be an everyday player. And also, he's 37. He's had injuries the past few years. Actually, he's had an injury every single year he's been a Met. But he was still decently effective this year. He improved upon his numbers from 23 and 24. So while he barely plays the field, I think to have him be like sort of a vibes guy or a clubhouse leader, especially if they're going to have some younger guys on the roster, I think it couldn't hurt to bring him back. I mean, on a 1-year deal for kind of cheap and not expecting him to play a whole lot, I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Sure. Yeah, after they re-sign Pete Alonso, you can do whatever you want for lengthening out the bench or whatever. But this is something that, to me, you could do it, but that's like the very end. I imagine his market is not too robust. You could probably wait till closer to spring, maybe anyway, to bring someone like that back. So that would be, if anything, if they do it, would be what I'd rather see. It definitely shouldn't be a priority at all. They have plenty of other priorities they have to deal with. I know Ken Rosenthal had mentioned that the Mets aren't really all in on any one player anyway. I don't really know what the hell that means. But it's just a lot to be done here. Any kind of final thoughts before we wrap up? I feel like that's just the theme of this.
Yeah, them signing Juan Soto for $800 million last offseason and them choosing not to add on to that or improve upon that after a year where they fell short of an extended playoff would kind of say to me that there's two kind of mindsets going on in the front office right now.
Yeah, and really, I mean, they talked about everyone, players, the coaches, the front office have all talked about how the season was a failure. And right now, this offseason, I mean, I can't say they're getting higher than like a C- right now. So
they're failing.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of my high school report cards, honestly. Not saying that I wasn't necessarily like in, tanking necessarily, but they weren't the best. They had a lot of weaknesses. The Mets have a lot of weaknesses right now. They need to build upon this. We don't want to be, reminded of how rough 2023 was when they tried to sign guys to overcompensate and ended up spinning their wheels and having a rough year, or 2021 when they didn't do much beyond the Francisco Lindor deal, or heck, the years where they signed Cespedes and then just brought back the gang that barely made the playoffs the year before. So the expectations, not sure what to expect anymore, but there's a long way to go this offseason. This offseason could get a lot better, could get a lot worse. So who knows? Just they have a long way to go here.
Yeah, agreed. We'll cap it there. Hopefully the next time we talk, Pete Alonso's a Met and not somewhere else. But between now and then, as always, guys, let's go Mets.